Hello guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Thank you for tuning into the channel. Today I'm going to talk about the process of how to take an idea and turn that into a manufactured tabletop gaming miniature. Today I'm going to discuss what I've learned over the last 5 years in taking an idea and turning it into a manufactured tabletop gaming miniature for your favorite RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons, or your favorite war games and skirmish games like Frostgrave or Warhammer. 32mm scale, 28mm scale, and the range that we like to use for D&D, Warhammer, Frostgrave, all of our favorite tabletop miniatures, RPGs, and skirmish games. I used to bartend and I knew nothing about manufacturing. And then eventually I got to an age where I got tired of that and I thought, well, what do I like to do? What do I want to do? What's some kind of job that I could mostly work from home? And for whatever reason, I thought that going into the gaming industry was a good idea and that I could just manufacture miniatures. I knew nothing of the industry, and I still consider myself to know very little of the industry, even though I've somehow managed to get a product from concept to distribution, and I'm going to share that process with you. The first hurdles I had to overcome were finding a place that was reliable to manufacture the tabletop miniatures, as well as finding a reliable sculptor who understood the medium and understood the scale, as well as the tiny, tiny, tiny final product. There are different kinds of sculptors out there, and not all are good at working at small scales, and not all are good at working at larger scales. So that's a crucial step. The first person I found, which I found online, turned out to be a fraud. They didn't charge a lot of money, which I was thankful for, but their product, their end result was just too low res to even be sculpt worthy, and their designs were not that great. So I went back to the drawing board and searched around until I found the current sculptor I work with, who is a professional, and he has been in the industry for over 20 some odd years. He understands the medium, he focuses on making smaller scale miniatures, and we work beautifully together. And he's in North America, but he's thousands of miles away. We communicate via email and we share our files through Dropbox. The next hurdle I had to overcome was finding a manufacturer who could create a highly detailed product. Now, I tried to find someplace locally in my hometown, and that proved very unfruitful. I couldn't even get salespeople in plastic manufacturing companies in the USA to return a phone call or even answer an email. They didn't even want to talk to me about my project. So, frustrated with having wasted all that time trying to get something manufactured in the USA, I decided to look overseas, which is what other miniatures companies currently do and have been doing for quite some time. The sculptor I hired was also able to help connect me with my final manufacturer, and with that, we have created a successful team. The original sales rep that I had for the manufacturer has since been promoted to engineer status. That's what his education is. And I think this man is worth his weight in gold. Anytime we have some slight design flaw, he's able to fix that. And he does a really great job with quality control. The other members of the team that I had to compile were a painter. People like a finished product that is a high detail paint job. And I'll tell you this, I'm not a miniature painter by any means. My skill level is like a 5-year-old. So I found a woman in Champaign, Illinois named Shoshi, and she does beautiful award-winning work, and we've also been working together on all of our projects. She paints the majority of our minis that are photographed. I do have some fan art that I use, but for the most part, Shoshi is our lady who does the painting. I also need graphic designers from time and time again to help with some of the packaging design. Sometimes I do some of the packaging myself, but it's when I have some extra cash, I will take that project and gladly hand that off to a professional designer, because I really just feel like I'm not the best at package design. I'm good at pushing pixels and digital imaging and manipulation and all that illusionary kind of trickery, but I am not a good package designer or graphic designer. So once I've got the team assembled, which I still work with the same people for the past 5 years, because if it's not broke, why fix it? And I think everyone does an amazing job. So the basic concept with designing some miniatures is coming up with the ideas. What do you want to make? And the second factor that you have to figure into the project is the molds that we use only have a select amount of space. So we can only fit so many miniatures into a master mold for a certain set dollar amount for that price of that mold. So, and that tends to be, it depends on the complexity of the models. Sometimes the models are broken apart and cast in 2 or 3 different pieces and then glued together. And then sometimes the model can be cast in just one piece and pop right out. So it's not a finite science, and I've been trying for 5 years to figure out exactly how the formula works, and there's no way I can do it. I just have to keep asking the engineer that I work with, is this one going to get split apart? How can they fit in there? And it's not an exact science. It's kind of, I just kind of have to eyeball and say a prayer to Jesus, Allah, and Satan, because if you say a prayer to all 3, your bases are covered, and hope that everything fits in a mold. Sometimes it doesn't work out. For instance, the Jackalope, the cowboy riding a jackalope set, that happens because I made a crucial mistake and miscalculated the number of minis going into a mold, and I had 1 extra that I had promised as a stretch goal on a Kickstarter. So rather than just waste all that extra space on the mold, I went to my sculptor and we decided to make something very just silly for a change that had no meaning and no purpose to do with anything, and came up with a pure Americana postcard style of cowboy riding a jackalope, and filled up that mold. Shenanigans. The first step in the process is to come up with a basic idea and then to provide some sort of concept art that I then take and hand over to my sculptor. Now, for the first project that I did, I happened to kit bash some actual Christmas Village miniatures that I purchased at one of the big box stores. A bit of a bigger scale than 32 millimeter. These are probably closer to 54 millimeter for the Santa and the snow person. So I took these miniatures and I kit bashed them, and then I sent pictures of those to my sculptor, and he replicated those and made them better and changed up some weapons a little bit and just fine-tuned what I had provided to him, which I considered a rough sketch. Now, with these sorts of projects, your sculptor will request some concept art of some kind. So you could provide a sketch, or in some instances, working with the sculptor that I've worked with, I'll provide a lookbook or a clipboard. I'll search the internet for certain images, or if I say, hey, I want them to hold a sword, I'll show a picture of the sword, or if the pose that the miniature has. When designing miniatures, there is a lot to think about. What am I making? What is the pose that they have? What are they holding? What sort of clothing are they wearing? What is their hairstyle? Do they have a hat? Are they wearing armor? What's on their person? And then I also like to think of, how is this going to translate when someone has a brush? Like, what little bits are going to nicely highlight with a dry brush? What sort of texture are we giving the miniature? Once all these questions have been answered and the concept has been figured out, then the guy who sculpts the miniatures begins his work in sculpting the minis, and he works really fast. He can crank these out pretty quick in about a day or so, which is really, in my opinion, quite amazing. So we work digitally. And what he does is he'll take 3D renderings of his work and send those to me in an email. And then I approve it, or I say, hey, can we change this? Can we change that? Some of the minis come together really easily, and then some take a while to work on. For instance, I had some issues with the workshop elves. Those went through a couple transformations, and that was completely on me because I was having a problem visualizing what sort of look I wanted the elves to have. The Christmas tree, it was another hard one to work on. That just took a while, translating that style of tree into a living creature. So, but I think it looks pretty cool and it works with the set. After all design ideas are finalized, those files then get stored in our Dropbox account, and then I email those links to the manufacturer overseas. And they take the files, download them, and 3D print them. After the files have been printed over at the manufacturer, they send me pictures. I have the gentleman I've been working with for 5 years, who's the engineer. I trust his opinion. He knows exactly what I'm looking for. We've been working together for quite some time now, and I trust his opinion on things. Once everything has been compiled, I've got the packaging done, the sculpts are finished, and the concept, everything's kind of laid out and put together. That all goes off to the manufacturer. Once those prints are finished, they are put into a procedure and they make a small, very small master mold. My guess is the mold is probably the size of our packaging. At this stage in the manufacturing process, I'll usually receive a copy of a production run of the minis to inspect and go over to make sure everything's okay and that the master mold doesn't have to be melted down and recast. These are sometimes handed off in person if we both go to Gen Con that year. I've already approved them, and we've done that all over through email. Once everything is manufactured, the pieces are then packaged up in the package design that we came up with, the various boxes that we've chosen. And currently I go with what's called a tuck box because it shows the product better for retailers. Then it's time for some shipping logistics. What does that mean? It means how does that shit get to here and where it needs to go. So the way that works is we have two options. It can either be done through air freight, which is rather expensive, or the actual real live, honest to goodness, slow boat from China does exist. And that takes about 2 months to get here. And the cost is usually about a third, sometimes even more, of air freighting the merch over here. Sometimes there are manufacturing delays, and since the merchandise that we're currently making, the minis that we make, are seasonal based, I've had to air freight them over before just to get them in time for the holidays. So this is just the real basic, simple process of how the miniatures are made. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. I have this little talk through. I hope you've learned something. I've tried to simplify it as much as I can and keep it as simple as possible, with giving out some decent information on how the procedure goes. So thank you very much. If you want to check out our minis, I've got some links down below. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and have a good one.